It's a big week in Texas. We have our first look at the proposed congressional map, the changes, the inside fight to give President Trump more power in D.C. Gromer, Democrats are talking about drastic measures.
Yeah, what will they do to try to stop it? There was a hearing on the proposal on Friday. It could hit the House floor soon. We're breaking it all down, what it means for North Texas voters.
This is Lone Star Politics from NBC5 and the Dallas Morning News.
Okay, Gromer, this is the proposed new congressional map for Texas. Now, President Trump says he wants 5 new seats from Texas. Here's how they're doing it. They're making 3 districts in Dallas, Austin, and Houston. They're turning Democratic districts into Republican-leaning districts. And then they are making 2 districts down in the Rio Grande Valley a little bit more competitive. Those seats are held by Democrats, making it more Republican. Gromer, what do you think? Is this going to be able to get President Trump the 5 seats he wants?
It'll get him close. We'll see about the Rio Grande Valley, because even though they're making those districts more Republican, this is going to be an election where Donald Trump is not on the ballot. And they're going against 2 veteran lawmakers who are used to campaigning in an area, Phil, remember, they used to vote Democratic all the time. So that will be tough. But some of the seats, including the situation in North Texas with District 32, that appears to be really, really a Republican stronghold now.
And so let's zoom in. So when I said they're trying to eliminate 3 Democratic districts in Dallas, Austin, and Houston, let's zoom in and see specifically how they're doing that. So we're going up now to DFW, right? Look at this orange district right there, 32. Right now it's held by Congresswoman Julie Johnson. Her old district used to be on the east side of Dallas, of Dallas County, and now they moved it just the northeast corner, and they're dragging it all the way out past Longview, 1 county away from the Louisiana border, turning that district from Democrats winning it with about 62% to Republicans winning it with about 60%. That's a big change, Gromer.
Yeah, you know, Phil, remember, that's the district that used to be represented by Colin Allred. He flipped it in 2018. Look at it now. Julie Johnson lives in Farmers Branch. Farmers Branch. And now that district is almost goes to Louisiana. So lots of rural voters, lots of small town voters to the east. Those are Republican strongholds. It's just, I mean, that is a Republican district. It's going to be hard for her to win there.
And it's forcing Congresswoman Johnson to either run in this now Republican district or run against another Democrat, Congressman Mark Vesey, whose base used to be here in Fort Worth. But as you see now, that's his district in green. They have scrunched that over, so making it just the Dallas County seat. They're forcing probably 2 Democratic incumbents to run against each other.
If that's the path they take. You know, redistricting is like this. You know, it's one of the ugliest words in politics, and that's why, Phil, because not only can you draw districts for yourself, but you can wreak mayhem with Democrats, because now Vesey has a decision to make. His district is wholly in Dallas County. You talked about Julie Johnson potentially running against him. What if another Dallas County Democrat says, hey, that area looks good, maybe I'll run? Vesey no longer has that Fort Worth base to depend on, that Tarrant County base. So there's some decisions that will have to be made by North Texas Democrats.
Now, they're going to try and sue to stop this map from taking effect. But in the meantime, Congressman Mark Vesey called the map racist, adding that, quote, what Donald Trump and Greg Abbott are doing isn't about democracy, it's about consolidating power. And a freshman Congresswoman, Julie Johnson, whose seat we just explained, called the move outrageous and, quote, gross partisan racial gerrymandering at the worst level. She spoke with NBC5's Meredith Yeomans about the party's next move.
Your reaction to this map when you saw it? You know, it really splits up our urban areas. If you look across the state, so here in Dallas, so in Texas 32, it pairs Carrollton, for example, goes through Richardson and goes all the way out past Longview, over almost 200 miles. And, you know, it's just insane. And then look what they're doing in Fort Worth. You know, they've really carved it up, tagged it up, and then they put downtown Austin and paired it with counties hundreds of miles away. You know, it's desperation. It's a power grab of the worst form, and it's really, I hope the voters are just outraged by it.
Yeah, because we're planning on putting the two District 32s side by side, and, you know, the current and then the proposed. It's unrecognizable.
That's right. I mean, it has no commonality. You know, right now, District 32 is compact. You know, it's an urban district. It has urban issues that we've, you know, advocated for in terms of housing and infrastructure and all kinds of things that affect our district here. And then to pair it in such a gross, gerrymandered way, you know, all the way out almost to the Louisiana line. I mean, think about what that does just administratively for our constituents. You know, part of it is we have to be accessible. We have district staff. We help thousands of people all the time with issues with the federal government. We're covering tax refunds, veterans issues, and all the like. And we need to be accessible to where our constituents can come and come and see us. You know, it is just not practical to expect that burden on the constituents either.
What do you think the objective is here?
To keep Trump in power. They know that Trump and these Republicans have passed some terrible legislation crammed down the throats of the voters that is very, very unpopular. They've dropped double-digit points in their approval ratings. They're underwater. If the elections were to be held tomorrow, they would lose in a landslide. So rather than have policies that the voters support and actually want to vote for, they crammed this crap down our throats, and now they're going to try to rig the maps up to try to prevent losses that they were going to have in November of 26.
What do you do now?
Well, we fight like hell. These maps haven't been passed yet. You know, it still has to go through the legislative process. I have all the confidence in the world in my Democratic cohorts in the Texas legislature. You know, I just came from there. I know those folks well. They have a lot of tools in their toolbox to see if they can't get these maps altered and adjusted. And they have lots of debate and procedural opportunities ahead of them to affect these maps. And we'll see what's able to happen. You know, one thing I've learned from Texas politics and being in the legislature is the bill that gets filed isn't necessarily the bill that gets passed. And so we'll see ultimately what happens and how these maps are ultimately finalized. But then there's the national fight too. You know, who knows what's going to happen in California and New York and other states to push back on this and what the ultimate outcome is going to be.
There's talk of Democrats leaving the state to kind of draw this out. What do you think about that, the effectiveness of that, the practicality, and are you in contact with, Democratic lawmakers in Texas to kind of strategize?
Well, I am certainly in contact with Democratic, my folks in the Texas House. I was a member of the Texas House for 3 terms. A lot of them are very close friends of mine. And so, of course, I'm speaking with them. But, whether or not to do a quorum break, that's ultimately their decision. It's a great sacrifice for each of these members to do that and stand up for our democracy. They have to be out of the state, away from their families, away from their jobs, subject to penalties within the House. It's a great sacrifice. But what we have seen throughout the state and all of these redistricting hearings that have happened, I was at the hearing Monday night in Arlington. Thousands of people are coming out and registering their visceral opposition to this map. I haven't seen anyone testify in support of it. So it's going to be really brazen for Republicans in the House to just flat out ignore the strong objections of voters all across the state.
On Thursday, the top Democrat in the U.S. House traveled to Austin. Gromer, you wrote about it in the Dallas Morning News. While standing with Texas congressional Democrats, Representative Hakeem Jeffries encouraged them not to give up the fight, adding that it's an all-hands-on-deck moment.
When the people fear the government, there is tyranny. But when the government fears the people, there is liberty. Show up, stand up, speak up for what is right, for their opportunity to determine their own destiny through the gift of democracy and free and fair elections. But the only way that will be brought about is if together we're able to stop the effort to gerrymander in a way that also violates the Voting Rights Act, the Texas congressional map, as part of their scheme to rig the midterm elections.
Jeffries does have a personal stake in the outcome in Texas. His party needs to flip only 2 GOP House seats next year for him to become Speaker of the U.S. House, which would put him behind Republican Vice President J.D. Vance in the line of succession to the presidency, Gromer. That's a lot coming up, including the Republican response to the state's redistricting effort. We sit down with Irving Congresswoman Beth Van Duyne, who faced a competitive race in 2020 before districts were redrawn in 2021. Now it's solidly Republican.
I had no way of communicating anything, and no one was in charge, and I waited there for over 12 hours for news, and literally no one could tell you anything.
Emotional testimony from the Hill Country as survivors and state lawmakers question emergency officials over their response.
And we are joined now by Congresswoman Beth Van Duyne, Republican Congresswoman from Irving since 2020. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Appreciate being here.
Let's first talk about redistricting, because that is going to directly impact all the members of Congress.
Correct.
Should the state legislature redistrict? Why or why not?
That's their call. We don't get a say in that in Congress. But I will tell you, when you think about how other states have handled it, I think they're totally within their purview to do that. It's not without precedent. The Supreme Court has found that it's absolutely legal to do. So if that's something that the legislature chooses to do, we're going to be 100% supportive of it. I love my district right now. We spent the last 3 years since redistricting getting out there and getting to know the constituents, the businesses, their pressure points. But I also look at North Texas as home. And so it's not going to be all that much different.
Making your district more competitive, are you worried about that at all?
Look, I have run in a very competitive district. I think Gromer can tell you back in 2020
race,
it
right?
was the most competitive district in the state. And it was very expensive. I have run in competitive districts before. I have won, even being outspent, multiple times. But I think we do my staff and I do an excellent job of communicating with our constituents, of responding to their needs. We concentrate on casework and being present in the district. I think that's important.
President Trump talked to you, members of the delegation, about redistricting. What did he say, and how did you guys receive it?
He talked about how important it is to be able to continue the work of this administration and the work that we've done the last 6 months. If you think about the one big beautiful bill that we passed, how we are fighting to cut down the regulatory war that the previous administration put on our businesses. We're trying to fight for additional economic growth. We're trying to get more money in our constituents' pockets. We're trying to protect our border, and we're working on some really important trade deals across the world. We want to be able to keep that going, and in order to do that, you have to have the Republicans maintain the majority.
I know some of these states have commissions, independent commissions, but are you concerned that California, Illinois, New Mexico, New Jersey, other states will start doing the same thing that's happening in Texas?
You look at how gerrymandered California already is. The fact that the statewide vote in California is 40% Republicans, and yet out of 52 congressional seats, there's only 9 Republicans. You look at a state like Massachusetts, where 35% is statewide Republican. They don't have any seats at all. It's incredible how the Democrats, when they're in power, how they take over, and they absolutely take over as much as they possibly can, and yet when Republicans choose to do it in a state like Texas, we are somehow vilified.
Well, opponents of this proposal say it cracks and impacts communities of color. How do you respond to that? Is that fair?
Yeah, I don't think that's a fair assessment at all. And again, I have not looked at I have not seen the new map, so I can't really respond to it.
But is it fair to crack and impact communities of color when you can see that a lot of that is happening?
I lived through redistricting in Irving, Texas, when we were all at large and we were told that we had to, that we actually had to district. What we found was there was no majority-minority They had to create one, and it was insane. I always said it looked like Puff the Magic Dragon. You know, you had nails going in here, you had tails. We're a very diverse state. So I think, you know, anybody who says that you can't get, or that you're going to have to pack and stack, is actually talking about gerrymandering to be able to do that.
On the big, beautiful bill that you mentioned,
Yeah.
the tax cut and spending package, question from I guess the millennials and the Gen Z out there will say, you know, okay, we get you're going to cut taxes. Did you cut enough spending? Because it looks like everything's going on the credit card still.
Well, I don't know if you saw the newest numbers. We actually had 5% decrease in government spending this past quarter. I think that's massive. You also saw an uptick in people's personal income. This is what Gen Zers are looking for. They want to make sure that they're going to have opportunities to be successful, you know, as they move along in their career. This is all about, this bill's focus was on economic growth, was saying how can we get businesses to have more job opportunities to be able to compete globally. And I think this bill does that. We also avoided the largest tax increase in our nation's history if we allowed the provisions to expire at the end of this year.
The 2017 ones would have
Correct.
expired. But does it worry you of how much we're putting on the credit card and the deficit?
Absolutely. I think that's why we have to look at economic growth. We are looking at government spending, I think, as evidenced as the 5% decrease, but we're also looking at ways to increase the economy. There's two ways of being able to pay down your debt: cut your spending and increase your revenue, and that's what this bill does.
What do you make of the debate that's going on largely in your party over the Jeffrey Epstein situation and the files? I mean, what's your position there?
I want all that stuff to come out. I am 100% for transparency. I think if there's information that's not prevented to come out by a court order, that does not hurt a continuing investigation, that's not outing or hurting potential victims or past victims, I want that information to come out. I think we've been very clear. I think the president has been very clear. I know the Speaker of the House has said as much. I think it's a distraction. I think it's being pushed by a Democrat Party that right now has lost its way, and they're looking for anything that sticks.
All right, Congresswoman, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
We'll continue to bring you updates on redistricting right here on Lone Star Politics, and you can read more at nbcdfw.com and dallasnews.com.
That's right. Up next, signs of yet another standoff between the state's top two leaders. Where the battle over THC stands, we'll talk about it next on Lone Star Politics.
Down in the Hill Country, families shared heartbreaking stories of loss as local officials sat in the hot seat over their response to the devastating flooding. Testimony revealed ahead of the storm, Kirk County had not done a full-scale evacuation drill, and only 6 of 19 camps had submitted their emergency plans to the county. With several bills on the table during the special session, lawmakers are now looking forward in an effort to prevent a similar tragedy. We'll continue to keep a close watch on any advance on that.
The debate over the future of THC in Texas also continues in Austin. Despite Governor Abbott's call for sensible regulation, the Senate doubled down on its efforts for a near total ban.
SB 5 advanced despite Dallas Democrat Senator Nathan Johnson putting forward an alternative plan. He presented a pair of bills with bipartisan support. He said his legislation would create the most comprehensive cannabis reform package this state has seen, while establishing a regulatory framework for all things THC.
It cannot logically be legal and illegal. If you want people to respect the law in Texas, it's got to be consistent. It's got to make sense.
Meanwhile, over in the House, an about-face last time the Texas House started with legalizing the products. This time around, the new author, Gary Van Dever, a Republican from New Boston, started with the legislation leaning towards an all-out ban, Gromer. He told me the final product may be different as he tries to negotiate between the two most powerful statewide leaders who are split on this issue.
We're looking for that sweet spot that, we're trying to thread that needle. Admittedly, it's a very small needle to thread.
The clock is ticking down to August 20th when the special session ends.
It's amazing, Phil. THC was thought originally was going to be the top issue with the special session. So much has changed since then, but it's still important.
It is, but I think that is a good example of how redistricting, as you said earlier in the show, as soon as you say redistricting, all the lawmakers, Republican and Democrats, look at the maps and get every other priority out of the way, and they focus on this.
Yeah, that's sucking up all the oxygen. Now the question is, how much will they be able to get to in this special session, including flooding, hill country flooding legislation. What will they do? What will they have to do in another special session, or maybe next regular session?
You think they have a second special session?
I think that happens, because I don't know how they get it all done with redistricting.
That's all the time we have. Stay tuned for Meet the Press with Kirsten Welker.
Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you back here next Sunday for more Lone Star Politics.